Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Agriculture Department is expanding its reorganization plans, moving hundreds of additional employees from its component agencies out of the Washington, D.C. area. Food Safety and Inspection Service employees working at its headquarters are being asked to move to states like Iowa and Georgia. USDA is also doubling down on reassignments that began under the first Trump administration. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman joins me now with more details. Jory, thanks for being here.
Hey, Terry. Great to be here.
There's a lot of moving pieces to this plan, so let's try to take them one at a time. And let's start with the Food Safety and Inspection Service. What do they do and where are they going?
Well, judging by the name, the Food Safety and Inspection Service does inspect food and ensure that it's safe. The most prominent part of its workforce are food inspectors. They make up a bulk of its workforce, and they go into meat plants and they ensure that everything is hygienic and safe and adheres to all legal requirements for that to be prepared safely. That's the most visible part of its workforce by far, but the folks that we're going to be talking about here are mostly its headquarters employees. Under this recently unveiled plan, USDA says that those Food Safety and Inspection Service headquarters employees, about 2/3 of them, are going to be packing up and moving to places like Iowa and Georgia. The reason for those places is because in Urbanville, Iowa, the agency is opening up a new National Food Safety Center, and the agency says that will serve as the primary location for administrative, technical, and support operations. Things like training, food safety education, financial operations, IT, administrative things like human resources, just to give you a general idea of things. And then what's going on in Georgia is that they're opening up a science center in Athens, Georgia, and that's going to build on an existing footprint, an existing laboratory that exists there, and that's going to bolster its capabilities in microbiology, in chemistry, and epidemiology. So they're building out its footprint beyond the Beltway, and they say that employees need to move to where the action is.
How many folks are we talking about here?
In all, a relatively small fraction of the total workforce. About 200 of these D.C. area-based headquarters employees are being asked to move, but around 100 of them will remain in the D.C. metro area, and they will stick around to do things like engage with Congress, work on policy development, and interagency coordination. So they'll still be a skeleton crew still in the D.C. area, but the agency is quick to point out, as we mentioned, that the vast majority of its workforce, about 85% of it, will not be touched, and that those food inspection employees, they will not be asked to move anywhere. They're going to continue to do their jobs the way they've done it, where they've done it.
Jory, this also is picking up some pieces that were left over from the first Trump administration's moves with USDA. Catch us up on those.
Right. So back in the first Trump administration, hundreds of employees at the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture were asked to move to Kansas City, Missouri. And this was a big reorganization back then. Since that first Trump administration, under the Biden administration, a lot of those moves were wound back. People were brought back to the D.C. area. They moved outside of Kansas City. Generally speaking, the impact of that relocation was no longer in effect. But now under the second Trump administration, USDA is doubling down. They're saying that more ERS and NIFA employees are going to be moving to Kansas City. And they said that for the employees under that original 2019 move who have gone elsewhere, that they're going to be going back to Kansas City as well. And to further broaden this out, the National Agricultural Statistics Service will also be sending employees outside of the Beltway, but they won't be going to Kansas City. They will be going to a regional office in St. Louis, and some other agency employees may also be going to other regional offices, but that part is to be determined.
This approach seems to really scatter a lot of the headquarters across the country instead of consolidating them in a single place. What is USDA offering as the rationale for all of these bits and pieces to move?
The two pieces we've heard from USDA is, one, they want to move employees closer to where their customers are. In a lot of cases, that's farmers, that's ranchers, that's people who are connected to agricultural in the agricultural industry. The other piece is that It is about cost. That they say that the cost of living in the DC metro area is higher. These agencies, of course, pay out a higher locality pay to these employees compared to some other parts of the country. And they say that they can do their job more effectively and more cheaply in other parts of the country. However, this doesn't really account for the considerable cost it will take for employees to either move their families, move their stuff across the country. That is an expensive undertaking. That is something that has stalled previous moves in the past for agencies. The other thing here is if these employees don't move, which is often the case, it's what we saw with the NIFA and ERS moves, more than half the employees chose to quit rather than relocate, then you're hiring entirely new people, and that is also expensive.
Jory, you mentioned the relocation consideration. In the first Trump administration, as you said, a lot of folks did quit rather than move. Is that the same environment? I mean, there's been so much churn in the federal workforce. Are people's calculus still the same?
It's hard to say. What we've seen in the past is that is the case, that you are going to see a lot of attrition. You are going to see a lot of people say, no, thank you. I'm going to find a job elsewhere rather than move with my job halfway across the country. Every agency is different. We have seen some attrition with not just the USDA moves, but of course with the Interior Department. They moved the Bureau of Land Management headquarters under the first Trump administration to Colorado. Some of that was also unwound after the first Trump administration. So it remains to be seen what kind of attrition rate we'll see with these particular moves. But let's remember that USDA is also looking at other moves beyond what we're talking about here. Last year, USDA announced that it was going to move about half of its headquarters employees out of the DC metro area and relocate them to 5 hubs across the country. And also, more recently, the Forest Service announced a multi-part reorganization. What that's going to mean is that it's going to move its headquarters from D.C. to Salt Lake City, Utah. It's going to mean potentially a significant closure of research facilities, about 3/4 of those. And the third and final part is moving its wildland fire personnel and programs from its agency to a consolidated agency with the Interior Department called the Wildland Fire Service. Now, the Interior Department moved ahead with its end of that reorg. However, USDA has not, and that's because Congress didn't put up the money for this fiscal year to do that reorganization. They say they need a now congressionally mandated study, someone to come in, take a look, see the pros and cons of this plan, and whether they should actually go ahead with it.
Well, speaking of Congress, Jory, are you hearing anything from members of Congress? Are they concerned about this USDA reorganization plan? And even if they were, would it matter?
Well, this is, I guess, a case where all politics are local. In cases where it's a congressperson or senator that is gaining federal jobs, they might be happy to receive those. And we have seen some statements to that effect where the people who stand to gain jobs in all of this, they are happy about this. The people who are losing jobs are concerned about this. But overall, this is a huge disruption for the lives of these federal employees. Either way, they're looking at uprooting their families, uprooting their lives. These are often mid-career or senior employees being asked to do this. That's one alternative. The other alternative is that they find jobs elsewhere. One thing we have heard from USDA's Deputy Secretary, he told lawmakers last year that he expects there will be a higher uptake on moves because there have been mass reductions in the federal workforce concentrated in the D.C. area. And he says that with a higher than usual unemployment rate, people are going to think twice trying to find a new job in this area.
That's Federal News Network's Jory Heckman. Jory, thanks for bringing us the story.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find all the details at federalnewsnetwork.com.